my Smiling Santa applique, I'm using my 5x7 hoop, some wash away stabiliser. I'm floating some cutaway on top so that when the wash away is no more, the stitches are still supported. My threads, matching bobbins, my scissors, some pins, my fabrics cut to size, and some batting, and my masking tape. First off, I'm going to hoop my wash away stabiliser. And I'm going to cut a piece of cutaway that's going to sit on top. I've loaded the first file into my machine and also my green thread because I'm using green fabric for the sack, and I'm now going to pop it into my machine and stitch round number 1, which is the outline. I'm going to turn my hoop over and I'm going to place the backing fabric over the outline, and I'm just going to add a little bit of tape just to hold it in place while it stitches. Okay, now I'm going to place my batting down and my top fabric over that, and once again I'm just going to use a little bit of tape just so that it doesn't move. I'm going to pop that in my machine and I'm going to stitch round number 2. Next is colour 3, which is the quilting. Next is a satin stitch border around the sack, and that's round number 4. Next I'm going to remove all the excess fabric from the front and back. I forgot to mention that I actually cut away the excess of the cutaway stabiliser as well at the same time that I cut the fabrics and batting away. Next I'm going to put that back in my machine and I'm going to stitch round number 4, which is the zigzag stitching that goes around the edge of the sack. Next is round 5, which is the wording. You can either go with what's already there, which is Merry Christmas, or you can add your own, as I have. Now that that's stitched, I'm going to remove the jump threads between the letters here. And if you're new to machine embroidery, they're the long threads that go from one area to another, and you can safely cut those. Okay, so next I'm going to remove this from the hoop, and you can trim up the back threads as well, of course. I'll do those in a minute. I'm now going to cut this out from my hoop. I'm cutting close to the stitch line but not actually touching it, because where this is wash away stabiliser, at the end I will run a cotton bud dipped in water around the edge, and it will all dissolve and disappear. And there's the first piece of this applique. Next I'm going to load the second file into my machine ready and hoop up for the next piece. I've hooped my wash away stabiliser. I'm placing my cutaway over the top. I'll now pop that back in my machine and stitch round number 1, which is the outline. As before, I'm going to turn my hoop over and I'm going to place my backing fabric over the back and tape it into position so that it can't slide about during stitching. Then I can lay my batting down and my white fabric. I'm now going to pop that in my machine and stitch round number 2, which will join everything together. Next I'm going to add my red fabric over the top, and this is going to do the hat area and this little piece here at the bottom. And I'm just going to tape this in place. I'll pop that back in my machine, and I'm now going to stitch round number 3. So now it's time to trim away all the excess. And I'm going to start with the back so that it doesn't get forgotten. Just remove this jump thread. Now all the excesses have been trimmed up, I'm going to pop it into my machine and stitch round number 4, which is going to do the zigzagging all around the outlines. Now that the zigzagging has been done, I would advise you to check around the edges to make sure that there's no fabric or batting or anything like that sticking out. If there is, to trim it back right up to the edge of the stitch line. If you go over it, I wouldn't worry too much. I'll just pop it back in my machine and stitch that round again to do the zigzagging over the top, and it'll be absolutely fine. If you don't do this now, by the time the satin stitch goes on, then it's going to probably show after the satin edge has been done. So now that I have checked mine, I'm going to pop it into my machine. I've loaded up my red thread, and the next step is a satin stitch all around the hat and the top of his jacket. I've loaded flesh pink thread into my machine, and I'm now going to stitch round number 6, which is the face area. I've loaded white back into my machine, and I'm now going to stitch round number 7, which is the satin stitching around the head. Next is the nose, so I've loaded pink into my machine, and I'm now going to stitch round number 8. I've changed my thread to black, and I'm now going to stitch round number 9, which is the eyes, and that's the final stitching for this part. All it remains now is for me to trim up that jump thread between the eyes and cut this part free from the stabilizer. Something I do need to do is to make sure that I trim as close as possible to the stitch line here and also along here, because those are going to be the joins for our next part. Okay, so next I'm going to load file number 3 into my machine. So my stabilizer's hooped, my cutaway is placed over the top. I'm now going to pop that into my machine and stitch round to number 1, which is the outline as before. I'm going to turn my hoop over, and exactly as before I'm going to add my backing. Then flip it back. Put my batting over the top and my white fabric, and I'm going to add a little bit of tape just to keep that from slipping around. going to slip that into my machine and stitch round number 2. Now I'm going to take my red fabric again and place it over the top of the white and tape it in place. I'm now going to put that in my machine and stitch round number 3, which is going to define all the red areas as in the previous place. I'm now going to trim up around here, which is where Santa's sack is going to sit. Okay, so I can now take my next piece of green fabric to match the sack and pop it over there. I'm going to tape it in place so that it doesn't shift while it's stitching, and then I'll pop it into my machine and stitch round number 4. Next I'm going to remove all the tape and cut away all excess fabric, batting and cutaway stabiliser from both front and back. Next I'm going to pop this back into my machine and stitch round number 5, which is all the zigzagging around the raw edges. I'm going to make sure that all my trimming is as close to the stitch line as possible as before. Now we come to joining the bottom part of the sack to the Santa body, and I'm just turning this round so that the part that actually attaches to my machine is at the bottom towards me, and the sack is going to join in place like a jigsaw puzzle. And what you want is this line of stitching sitting on top of this edge stitching here. So I'm going to use a couple of pins just to hold it in place, and probably some tape as well so that it doesn't shift during stitching. And with pins, as I say every time, keep them as far away as possible from your stitch line. Okay, I'm now going to put that into my machine and stitch round number 6, and that's going to do a line of zigzagging to join along this edge here. You may find that you have to slow down your machine more so than your slowest stitching. If you need to do that, just use the on and off button to do so, if you haven't got any other form of control over it. Next I'm going to stitch round number 7, which is the zigzagging that goes all the way around the edge, and it will stop where we're going to join the Santa's head to his body. Next we're going to join Santa's head to his body, and that piece is going to sit here. So as for the bottom piece, I'm going to pin it with the pins well out of the way so that the zigzagging can join it. If ever you put a piece on and then stitch it with your zigzag line, and it doesn't match up, take the time to unpick it. All you've got to do is run a quick unpick straight through the zigzag stitching, and it'll come apart really easily, and re-stitch it again with the same colour number as you did before, because otherwise it's not going to join properly and then you're going to run into difficulties. Right, now that this is pinned, I'm going to pop this into my machine and stitch round number 8, which will zigzag all the way along the join. I've loaded black thread into my machine, and I'm now going to stitch round number 9, which is Santa's belt. I've loaded gold thread into my machine because the next area to be stitched with round number 10 is the gold belt, his gold buckle. I've changed my thread to red and it's now going to do the red satin stitch, and this is round number 11. I've now changed my thread to white for round number 12. I've changed my thread back to green to stitch round number 13, which is the rest of the sack. I've changed my thread to white again, and it's now going to do the satin stitch and detail on the mittens. There it is, all stitched out. I'm going to remove this from the hoop in a second. Now you'll notice here in my belt that I've got some areas of red showing through. I'm going to show you a little trick just to get rid of that. I'm going to take a black Sharpie marker, it's a permanent marker, and I'm just going to colour in those areas that are sticking out. And because it's permanent marker, it's not going to wash out. If you can hear noise in the background, that's my cat playing around. He's scratching up a cardboard box. Okay, the areas here where there's red, there and there, that's where I didn't cut my fabric back far enough before the satin stitch went over the edge, so that's why that's showing, and there isn't much I can do about that because I don't have a white permanent marker, otherwise I would fill it in. Right, let's get this free from the hoop. Okay. So now all that remains to do is to get some water and some cotton buds and take them round the edge of the applique to get rid of the wash away stabiliser. So we'll do that next. Okay, so here's my water and here's my cotton bud. I'll just run it round the edge. So I'm just going to give Santa a press now. This applique is going to a little boy for his bedroom door, and on the front it says Sowen's bedroom, in case you're wondering. I hope you enjoyed this stitch along. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new ones as they come out, and thank you for joining me.